Hello and welcome to the OTB channel. Are you a fan of the Cinnamon desktop environment? Well, if you are, you've probably used Linux Mint, who have been the champions for Cinnamon for many years now. But there's a new kid on the block, the Ubuntu Cinnamon Remix. Have you taken a look at it yet? Well, that's what I'm going to do now after the intro. Okay, welcome back. So, Ubuntu Cinnamon Remix. Why am I looking at this? Well, primarily because one of my viewers said, can you take a look at this? It's pretty good. And I thought, well, okay. I quite like the Cinnamon desktop. It was one of the escapees of the GNOME 3 days when GNOME 2 was abandoned, and many of us were appalled because we were fans. There were many developers who obviously felt the same. The Cinnamon desktop was one of the new innovations to come out of that, those debates and people not wanting to go to the standard GNOME shell. The Mate desktop was another one, and even Ubuntu. At the time, they didn't want to go to GNOME 3. They developed Unity. But Cinnamon has very much been something that's been a Linux Mint thing. The Linux Mint developers put it together, they've maintained it. Yes, it's been available to install in any number of distros for many years now. But Linux Mint and Cinnamon are almost synonymous with each other. So when I saw the Ubuntu Cinnamon Remix come out and I went over to their webpage, the first thought for me was, well, it's a new kid on the block. Why would anybody install a Cinnamon distro as opposed to Linux Mint, which has been around for years, is stable, you know exactly what to expect? Well, one reason, of course, is look and feel. Look and feel can be changed endlessly. Nevertheless, we're kidding ourselves if we don't accept that it is one of those things that actually attracts new users. So, Ubuntu Cinnamon Remix, if it has a different look to Linux Mint Cinnamon, some users will be attracted to one as opposed to the other. But the other reason, and perhaps more important, is the Linux Mint is based on the LTS. Yes, they do point releases to keep it up to date, but inevitably many of the packages, as the years go by between LTS releases, will start to get quite old. An Ubuntu Cinnamon desktop is going to get the same releases that Ubuntu releases every 6 months. So it would enable you to stay more up to date. Yes, it perhaps won't have things like the the Linux Mint Software Center and the Linux Mint PPAs. Is that a huge thing? Well, it depends. If you're a fan and you like the way that Linux Mint works, possibly it is. But if you're more open and you enjoy the Cinnamon desktop, perhaps it's worth taking a look. Personally, I like Cinnamon. The thing to say, though, it's not thought of as a lightweight desktop system. It's one of the heavyweights out there. Not hugely heavy, but if you have older hardware that's struggling for resources, it probably wouldn't be your first choice. But as a desktop environment, over the years, I've used it a few times and I have no problem with it. One of the things that I would say is if you're coming across from Windows, it's immediately familiar. The look and feel is quite similar. So, without further ado, let's just quickly have a look at the web page that we have for Ubuntu Cinnamon. If I go to our combined view, You can find the web page on ubuntucinnamon.org, and you can download all sorts of things from here. If you click on the download link, you get a number of links to different things. I downloaded my version by a torrent, but you can go to SourceForge. I try and avoid SourceForge these days because it's dog slow. But I noticed on the SourceForge page, as well as the distro that's based on the new long-term support Ubuntu release, the development version 2010 is also there to download if you wish. Not something I'd personally do because, well, let's face it, the LTS has only just been released, and the development release it's early days for it, so it's going to be quite unstable. So, easy to get, not one of the official flavours yet, but I'm sure that's ultimately a long-term objective, but that doesn't mean that you shouldn't download it. Many of the flavours started off as independent, so let's take a look. Right, so you should see in front of you now the screen of Ubuntu Cinnamon Remix. You'll already notice that it's not in full HD as yet. It clearly hasn't got the VirtualBox guest editions installed, so I've got it on 1680 by 1050, which is enough to do the installation. First thing to say is, well, it's very obviously Ubuntu. The colours, the wallpaper, give that away immediately. But let's get on and do an install. I believe that rather than Ubiquity, the Ubuntu Cinnamon Remix actually uses Calamaris. So let's just follow along. I'm expecting this to be a fairly straightforward next thing. It's already picked up my time zone, which is great, and my keyboard. Let's go for the automatic option and just erase the disk and do an automatic install. For simplicity, I've booted this in BIOS mode, so it's fairly straightforward. Let's hit next and enter my user details, and I'll go with the normal and enter my password twice. And we won't log in automatically without asking for a password. So here's our confirmation screen, and all looks good. So let's click install. Are we sure? Yes, absolutely we are. Install now. I'll speed this up and we'll come back once it's finished. Right, so pretty much as I expected, a really straightforward install. We started at 12:32. It's now 12:41, so 9 to 10 minutes, absolutely fine. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to shut this down, remove the ISO image just in case it hasn't been automatically removed. I'll boot it up again. If necessary, install the guest editions so we get a full HD screen, and we'll come back and we'll have a look at exactly what Ubuntu Cinnamon release is all about. And here we are. You should see in front of you now the installed version of Ubuntu Cinnamon Remix. I've installed the guest editions, and we've got a full 1080 screen. It's a shame they weren't installed by default. It's always nice when you're reviewing a distro when it just works and you don't have to do anything to get the full HD screen, but it's a minor thing, to be honest, and not something that's going to affect you as far as installing on bare metal is concerned. So, first impressions. Well, as I said before, it's very obviously an Ubuntu system. largely because of the wallpaper that we have there, but it just has that certain look and feel. We seem to have quite a nice orange, brown, flat icon theme, which I could live with. It's very traditional in the Ubuntu style, and yeah, it looks great. What have we got in the menu? We have our traditional Cinnamon menu. Let me just shut this file manager down so it doesn't detract from what we're looking at. If we go to accessories, we've got the usual things there: a text editor, archive manager, etc., etc. We have LibreOffice Math in education. We have a number of games already installed, chess and mahjong being amongst them, and Sudoku, never quite know how to pronounce that. A document scanner, the GIMP, it's there from the get-go. And in internet, we have Firefox and Thunderbird. I always think those two are a really sane set of defaults. I don't know if everybody watching this has now moved on to use web-based email only. Personally, I don't. I still use Thunderbird for my IMAP email. To my mind, it's simple, it's been around a long time, and it just works. So as a default, I think that's great. In the Office category, well, we have the full version of LibreOffice and a Trill for viewing PDF documents, which is all good. And a very small sound and video section, but it has celluloid there. I haven't explored that in a huge amount of detail, but I watched a few videos this week, and some people are now starting to suggest it over VLC. Okay. I'm still a VLC user, so I would probably install that. But the default applications, I always prefer it if there's not too many, because otherwise you end up with a load of applications that you're not going to use, because we all have our favourites, and we're going to install stuff anyway. Admin and preferences we'll look at in a minute. Places, yeah, all the normal stuff. And recent files. Okay, so let's start off. Let's do a right click on the menu, which gives us the normal things you expect to see in Cinnamon: create new folder, create a new document, add desklets, and change desktop background. I do like the open terminal and open as root there. I think that's really handy for admin purposes. But let's have a look at changing the desktop background and see what it offers. Okay, so this is pretty unusual. We have a number of different directories here, starting off with a default background from Adwaiter. Let's click on backgrounds. Right, we have a range of different backgrounds there. Oh, that's in your face. I don't think I could live with that. That's a bit nicer. Yeah, not a huge choice there. Just a few defaults to get you started. What have we got in here? The focal wallpapers. So you have a full choice of those as well. Some of which are quite nice. I do quite like them. I tend to go for these natural versions more than anything else. So a garden, yeah, why not? Future prototype, okay, that's your Debian wallpaper. Inksplat, Debian wallpaper. Joy, the same. Lines, again, Debian wallpaper. Moonlight, okay, so it's including your standard Debian wallpapers as well. But actually under the wallpapers category, we seem to have Ubuntu Cinnamon wallpapers. Okay. excuse me, I think if I was going for this, I don't know what this shadow is over here. I'm presuming it shouldn't be there. It's probably something to do with the resolution in VirtualBox. There we are, it's gone. But okay, you've got quite a few to set you off. I like that grey. I think that looks quite smart. So, okay, it's a smart looking desktop. Let's go into our control center and see what's there. So we have a link there to backgrounds, as you would expect. We also have effects. What Windows effects do we want to enable by default? And we have a whole range of options that you can play around with and customize should you see fit. Your standard sort of applications here to select your fonts and to look at your themes. So the window borders we're using at the moment are Chemo Dark, but you have a few options there if you want to change them around. And our icon set is also Chemo Dark. I did see a review a few days ago of the GNOME version of Ubuntu, and their icon set looked really nice, and I suspect they might well have been this Camino Light. And do you know what? I'm going to stick with that. I think they're really quite stunning, that icon set. It's something special. You have controls as far as your buttons are concerned. Your mouse pointer, play around with it if you wish. And your desktop more generally, how you want to have it looking. So it's on Chemo Dark at the moment. You have the option to install a whole range of online themes and essentially do whatever you want with it. And you have a settings option here. Do you want to show icons in menus? Do you want to show icons on buttons, etc., etc.? It's a very complete desktop Cinnamon. I'm not seeing anything particularly outstanding here, but it's pretty much what I expected. So, going into the preferences, accessibility, account details, applets. Let's go into applets. So you have a whole range of things here that you can activate. So I'm just looking here. Let's have a look at the rubbish bin and control the rubbish bin from the panel. So let's look at the panel and hit add. And there we go. Our rubbish bin's in the panel. Remove it. I do like Cinnamon because it is so configurable. We then have the opportunity to download other little bits and pieces. So let's just clear the cache and refresh and see what's there. And as you can see, we've got all sorts there. Spices, lots of bits and pieces to make your desktop look pretty. Okay, date and time, desklets, your desktop itself. How do you want it to look and what icons do you want on it? So if you didn't want all of these on it, well, it's simple enough to turn them off. And just have your home folder on there, which is how I tend to work more generally. But it's personal preference more than anything else. Extensions, so we've got the transparent panel extension installed there. I don't know if this will actually work on VirtualBox. Yeah, it's not compatible with your current version of Cinnamon. It may break your system anyway. Load it anyway. Oh, I'll just say no to that. Fine. General. So compositor options and miscellaneous options. Hot corners, you can set these up. They're all switched off by default at the moment. Notifications. Do you want them enabled or not? I tend to find notifications quite annoying, but some can be quite useful. Online accounts. Okay, so this is typically the Ubuntu online accounts page. The panel. How big do you want it to be? So it's at 40 at the moment. Do you want to make it smaller? Do you want to make it bigger? Okay, so you can set it back to 40 there. Do you want it left, centre, right, the font size? Whatever you want to do. Do you want to auto hide it? Completely up to yourself. Preferred applications? Always nice to have this to see what's set as default. Absolutely fine. Privacy? Remember recently accessed files, never forget them, or check connectivity. A screensaver, do we want it to start? Apparently 15 minutes and the screensaver starts and it locks. Okay, startup applications, nice and simple. You can add new applications to the menu if you need to. Windows. So what actions do you want to enable when double clicking, middle clicking, right clicking the title bar, etc. And playing around with the focus or resizing windows, etc, etc. Alt tab. Okay, so what do you want on the alt tab switcher style? So let's just hit alt tab. Okay, quite nice. So let's go back. What else am I looking for here? So window tiling, right? Enable window tiling and snapping. Tiling HUD visibility. Normal things that you'll find in Cinnamon from what I can see. What I am looking for though is, I'm moving down to hardware here. So we've got Blue Man for your Bluetooth. Color profiles for your printer. Now I'm really interested to see it's already picked up my default printer here, which is great. Your display, you can see it's 1920 by 1080. Do you want to enable user interface scaling? Great if you've got one of these massive screens. Do you have a Wacom tablet? You can do it all from there. Your network. Okay. Power management. What happens to the screen when you do certain things. Sound, printers, system info. Okay. And administration, you can administer your users and groups from there. If we go to the keypad and we look at layouts, so it's already set English UK as my default, which is great because that's what I actually did during the installation. And if you want to set shortcut keys, well, to your heart's content here. Is anything actually set at the moment? Let's just have a look. Let's have a look at launchers, for instance. So launch terminal, Control-Alt-T is already assigned. So you would need to have a look here, and you can pretty much assign whatever you want. And if it's not in this tree view already, create a custom shortcut. What about the printer? Let's just give it a go. I'm pleased to see that it's already picked up my Canon MG5600. If I go into properties, should we print a test page just to see? Why not? Test page submitted, and I'm turning around to see what's happening to the printer, if anything, and it's starting. So I didn't even need to open up printers, search for a network printer, it just found it. So let me just pause this and we'll come back once it's done it. Well, that printed fine, so really impressed when things like that happen and it just works and I don't need to do anything about it. So pretty good. First impressions are, it seems quite slick. It's a very usable desktop. Right, I just had to pause there for a minute because the printer was doing its thing, but it's stopped now. So, One of the things that I had in mind was, has this got a firewall enabled or installed by default? It would appear not. Not really an issue. You can install UFW and GUFW from the repos, and not having it installed by default isn't really an issue because most distros don't enable it by default anyway. I would like to see the firewall at least installed from the word go. I just want to check that I haven't missed it in the settings, but I don't see it anywhere. Just something to be aware of. So I believe that we actually have, and there it is, Synaptic Package Manager installed by default and HTOP installed by default. Let's just open HTOP and see where we are. Well, that's not dreadful. The Cinnamon desktop is not known for being a lightweight desktop, not by any stretch of the imagination. According to that, it's running at 932 megs. Remember, this is in VirtualBox, so that's pretty much acceptable. If you've got an old machine that's struggling for resources, the chances are you're not going to be installing a Cinnamon desktop anyway. So that's HTOP. What else have we got in administration that we might have missed? Let's have a look at the Synaptic Package Manager. Always glad to see this installed by default. Here we go. And let's have a look at what the repos are. So, if I can just make that a little bit bigger so we can see what we're doing. So, obviously, the Ubuntu software and all the Ubuntu repos. And interesting to note that the Cinnamon Remix team have added their own PPA there. I'm not surprised to see that, to be honest, given that this is not an official flavour of Ubuntu yet, so a PPA has been added for all the little tweaks and extras. In terms of updates, they're pretty much what you'd expect. Additional drivers, I'm not expecting to see anything here, given that I'm using VirtualBox, and yeah, as you can see, the sort of options we normally get on this. So it's got a PPA installed, but other than that, we're pretty much standard. What have we got in terms of software? Do we have a software store? Yes, we do have a software store. Let's have a look and see what that is. It doesn't want to move this. Oh, there we are. Let's go shopping. And it will hopefully move now. I quite like the theme. And it's pretty much as normal. Being Ubuntu, it's going to have Snapd support here rather than Flatpak support, which is one of the things that will differentiate it from Mint. So let me shut that. The software updater. Let's just wait for that to launch. It's looking to see what needs to be downloaded. Okay, just for information, that failed to run and seemed to crash. And in order to shut it down, I had to log out and log back in again. I have just run sudo apt update from the terminal, and again that hung part of the way through. Let me just show you. If I do sudo apt update, enter my password, it's now getting further. It was previously hanging on where it says get 5. So perhaps something to do with the servers more than anything else. And I did run a sudo apt update when I first installed it, and I did check the software updater, and everything was working fine. So I'm not particularly going to make a criticism as far as that's concerned. This one's worked. 395 packages can be upgraded. So that's pretty much it as far as Cinnamon is concerned. Is there anything else that I wanted to show you? Perhaps just one thing. They do have a little app here called Cinnamon Layout, which I quite like, and I haven't tested this, so let's see what it does. So we can change our default Cinnamon layout to traditional Windows XP inspired layout with non-grouped window list. Okay. Update Cinnamon layout system default to traditional. So let's just do yes. And what's the menu now look like? Okay. Okay, so it's changed the panel around more than anything else. Let's have a look at some of the other options. What about Windows 7 inspired layout? Let's hit yes. Right, hopefully this should now take an effect, full effect. The menu doesn't seem to have changed that much, to be honest. There's nothing staggering there. Let's try something a little bit different. Cupertino, a Mac OS X inspired layout. I bet this uses a panel down below, a dock, should I say, and yes, it does. Okay, and it's moved the bar up to the top. And yes, it's going to get me to say okay again. Okay, well, you can pretty much do anything you want here. You can play around at your heart's content. I'm going to set the default system layout again, and I presume it's going to prompt me now. And there we go. Okay, it seems to take a while to take effect. I'm not sure that I noticed that much difference on the first two there, but obviously I've not explored in detail. Nevertheless, it is what it is. I think it's probably time to have a chat. So what do we think about Ubuntu Cinnamon? First impressions for me are it's very pretty, without a shadow of a doubt. Everything that I want seems to be there. It can be configured in many different ways. I like the default themes. It's no surprise itself, you know, it's Cinnamon and it's pretty much what I expected. But yeah, it's got a different look and feel to Linux Mint, if that's important to you. And I think it's a viable alternative. Will it actually be competition for Linux Mint? Well, I think it's probably got its work cut out because Linux Mint has been around for so many years now and it's got such ardent fans. And the big thing here is, do you want to stay on an LTS release or do you want to track the new releases by Ubuntu every 6 months? And some fans will want to go every 6 months. Some will prefer the LTS release. So it's completely up to yourself. For me, if I was to say which do I prefer in terms of look and feel, I'll go for the Ubuntu Remix. But to be honest, I'm really not going to base a judgment on that because I would always change the look and feel whatever I did. Would I install it? Probably not, but that's nothing against the distro itself. As you're all aware, I'm moving more towards window managers myself at the moment, and although I do still use a desktop environment, Mate is still my favourite. I've tried both Cinnamon and Mate, And for me, Mate came out on top. That's not to say that there is anything wrong with Cinnamon at all. It's a great desktop. So it's going to be a matter of personal preference. What I would say, if you're a Cinnamon fan, give it a look at least. Fire it up in VirtualBox and see what you think. If you're coming across from Windows, put it on your checklist of distros that you're going to look at to decide what you're going to install. And it will be interesting to see how it develops. I have no doubt that it will eventually become one of the official flavours, but that may well take a few releases as yet. So that's it for today, guys. Hope you enjoyed the video. Don't forget to join me on Library and on the OldTechBloke Facebook group. Have a great day.